Bible story, the disciples are praying at 9 o'clock, noon, and 3 o'clock. And they're going into the temple to pray, and they see this man who is in need at the gate of the city. And the man is looking for alms, which means money, food, or any kind of donations. Today's gospel is from Acts 3, verses 1 through 10. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a man lame from birth was being carried in. People would lay him daily at the gate of the temple called the Beautiful Gate, so that he could ask for alms, which was food, money, or donations from those entering the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked them for food, money, or donations. Peter looked intently at him, as did John, and said, "Look at us." And he fixed his attention on them, expecting to receive something from them. But Peter said, "I have no silver or gold, but what I have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, stand up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and raised him up, and immediately his feet and ankles were made strong. Jumping up, he stood and began to walk. And he entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. And the people saw him walking and praising God, and they recognized him as the one who used to sit and ask for alms at the Beautiful Gate of the temple. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. The congregation may be seated. In today's Bible story, the disciples, Peter and John, are walking into the temple to pray, and they see this man in need. They're going to pray, but here's this man. And so they stop, and I love this part. They look into his eyes and they say, "Look at me. I have no money to give you, but what I have is even better." My heart for working with the homeless and the hungry started when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. I worked for Gibson Guitars, and there was a man named Bo that would come into the building occasionally. He was homeless, and he was looking for food. Well, we became friends, and he knew that if he really needed a meal, he could come to me. So he'd come to Gibson, and he was a musician, and so I grabbed 2 guitars, and we'd sit down and play about a half a dozen Arlo Guthrie and Willie Nelson songs. I'd give him a few dollars as security was coming, and he'd be exited from the building. Well, this started my heart for working with the homeless and the hungry. 4 years ago, we brought kids to New Orleans for the National Youth Gathering. And we trained the kids before we went to New Orleans about seeing the homeless on the street and how to react to it. Now, I want to make it clear that we have a homeless problem, a poverty problem, and a hunger problem right here in our community. But it looks different in Hillsboro than it does on the streets of New Orleans. In Hillsboro, this is a little more discreet and it's a little more hidden. In New Orleans, it's obvious. And so we trained our kids to engage these people on the street, to look them in the eye and say, "I don't have any money for you today." I said, don't open your pocket or your wallet or your purse and give them cash for a couple of reasons. One, our safety of our kids is always our first concern. And secondly, most of the time when we open our money and give it to somebody on the street, we're contributing to a problem more than to a solution. And so when we're in New Orleans, of course, our kids saw homeless people on the street. And at devotions at night, they said, this is tough. It's tough to walk by somebody who's in need and not give them food or money. And our response as adult leaders said, wonderful. I'm glad you want to help. But let's help in a way that really does provide help. Through an agency or a homeless shelter or through the church so that we contribute to a solution and not a problem. So that started our work for the next summer's trip. And we started planning a trip to Minneapolis and St. Paul that we called Hope for the Homeless. And we served the homeless in a few different ways. It was a few different homeless shelters. And we did what you would expect to do at a homeless shelter. We made sandwiches. We unloaded a semi-truck full of food. We brought donations of money and food and toiletries and the things that a homeless shelter needs to function. But the most meaningful thing that we did on that trip is we met people. We had this forum and discussion of 4 men who had experienced and were experiencing homelessness. And at the beginning of that conversation, they told their stories and we told ours. And by the end of the conversation, it was no longer them and us, but simply us together. In the sharing of stories, something special happened. And when we finished the discussion, they said, well, what are you doing the rest of the day? Well, we follow this model of ministry that Jesus taught us, where we do come and see events where we're able to get people's attention, and then we're able to love, serve, teach, and do ministry. And we do this in youth ministry, where we'll do come and see events so that people want to go on those trips. And so we go to the Mall of America, we go to Valley Fair, we go to a Twins game, and then we also serve at a homeless shelter. And so then they asked us what we were going to do that evening. We said, we're going to a Twins game. Now, the reason we were going to the Twins game was because it was going to be fun, and it kind of captured some youth's attention. Got a few kids to go on the trip that maybe wouldn't have gone on the trip otherwise. Well, the director of the homeless shelter said, I want you to think about a few things when you're at the Twins game. First of all, I want you to be aware that we feed people for about 25 cents a meal at the homeless shelter. Remember that when you're spending $15 on a popcorn and a pop. Also pay attention that we're feeding people for 25 cents a meal, and those baseball players are making millions of dollars to play a game. And she said, the other thing I want you to think about is stereotypes of homeless. Now, a lot of people will assume that homeless people don't have a job and that all they have to do is go get a job and everything will be okay. She said, but imagine going to fill out a job application, and what does it ask for? An address. How do you get a job when you can't even fill out the job application? She said, however, the Minnesota Twins and Target Field will hire homeless people. They'll hire people who don't have a permanent address. So this stereotype that the only thing homeless people do is panhandle and beg for money on the street corner, remember that when you're at the Twins game and you're paying $15 for a popcorn, that the money you're handing over is probably to a homeless person that has a job. When we left the Twins game, we walked outside of the gate of Target Field, and of course, what did we see? Just like Peter and John in today's text, there were homeless people. And they were holding cardboard signs that said a variety of things, but there was one girl that really captured our attention. And she was sitting on the sidewalk. She looked like she was 15 or 16 years old. She was maybe 17, but no older than that. And she had a cardboard sign that said, pregnant and scared. Well, we got on the bus, and we came around the block right to where she was sitting. And I remember sitting in the front seat, and I looked over my right shoulder down at this girl, and she had this sad look in her eye. And over my right shoulder, I can see our youth group girl who's sitting in the seat behind me, and she's looking at the girl as well. And our youth group girl just gave this little wave to this girl who was sitting on the street. And she looked up at our youth group girl and got a little smile on her face and waved back. What I wanted to do was go to the front of the bus and open up the door and say, "Get on this bus." This didn't look like a girl that belonged on the street. She looked like she belonged in our youth group. I wanted to be able to say, "We'll take care of you. If you need food, we'll get you food. If you need a safe delivery, we'll give you a safe delivery." And in that little moment of our youth group girl and the girl on the street, something special happened. This summer, we again are doing Hope for the Homeless. We're going back to the same homeless shelter. We're going to meet with some of those same 4 people that are now called educators who are working their way out of homelessness, that are employed through the homeless shelter, who are going to educate us about homelessness. Now, of course, we'll bring donations, we'll bring money, we'll bring food, we'll bring toiletries and the things that they need to make a homeless shelter function. But it's not about money, it's about relationship. In today's text, when Peter and John walk up to that man who is in need, they said, "We don't have any money to give you, but what we have is even better. Because what we have is Jesus Christ. What we have is hope and healing." You see, when we do missions work, we bring to each other Jesus Christ. And the reason I say we bring to each other is because we never do missions work with the attitude of we're right and you're wrong. We're good and you're bad. But rather we walk with each other. We listen to each other. We learn from each other. And we bring to each other hope and healing. We live in a world that is full of pain. A world that is full of struggle and disagreement. And I don't think that this is ever more evident than in an election year. But let us as the church stand up and say, we can help. Let us be the ones to show compassion, kindness, and forgiveness. Let us be the ones who open the door of the bus and say, get on the bus, we're in this journey together. May we listen to one another, learn from one another, and bring to each other hope and healing in Jesus Christ. To God be the glory, now and forever. Amen. When we got back from that trip, I was thinking about that girl who was on the street. And through a few other things, these words sort of came to me. And I wrote this song about being able to provide help and how difficult at times this is. And I played this song a couple of times this week at our midweek worship services, and I told our volunteers who were there, I don't know if I should sing this song on Sunday morning. And they all said, sing the song. And there's a third verse to this song that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I never knew how true it was until this year. And I don't know if it's correct, but I know for sure it's how I feel. And this song is called Problems of My Own. Old man on the corner, an old guitar and a cardboard sign, singing songs, liquor on his breath, and a sad look in his eye. I sat down beside him. We sang a few Arlo Guthrie songs. I bought him food just before they kicked him out of town. Old friends are acting strange. This place don't feel like home. I'd like to help, but I've got problems of my own. 17 and on the street, down and out and scared. Her mom is gone, no one else seems to care. Pass by with judgment in your eyes. She's got a baby on the way. She does what she has to do to survive another day. Old friends are acting strange. This place don't feel like home. I'd like to help, but I've got problems of my own. I hear these politicians talk about what they would do to win a vote. Is it asking too much to tell the truth? Scandals, lies, and alibis, infidelity. The truth is your politics and ideas are killing me. Old friends are acting strange. This place don't feel like home. I'd like to help, but I've got problems of my own. I'd like to help, but I've got problems of my own.